heavy nearby. Enemy
Hi,
heavy
hello,
spotted.
welcome to Class 1
Big buffer.
Basic Fundamentals.
There you go, it's
You
better.
crouched
You're
at
in.
the exact
What's
right
up?
time, Trax.
I know how to fuck up your end, bro.
Alright, so for the recording, we talked about sensitivities and settings. Basically, have potato INI, have raw mouse input enabled, have mouse acceleration disabled. Make sure your sensitivity isn't crazy high, crazy low. You should be aiming for 20 to 40 centimeters hip fire and 40 to 80 centimeters ADS.
And if my ADS is below that,
It may be beneficial to raise it or to lower your sensitivity and raise the distance for more consistency, especially in ADS where you really shouldn't be having to make big adjustments, so having a high sensitivity is not necessary. But again, don't ruin your comfortability and enjoyment of the game trying out a new sense. It's really not that important.
You make small incremental changes over time.
Depends if you're
Honestly,
not willing to make the
either or.
change.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can shock your hand,
Eyes open.
but
Enemy heavy.
Yeah, I
So
normally
I'm
just
doing-
like pick the sensitivity I want to like get myself at, and then I'll make a couple small adjustments the days afterwards to get it where I like it. But
Spotted an enemy heavy.
I'm
Yeah.
a fan of big jumps, especially if you're trying to train a new habit. Like if you're trying to get lower sensitivity, I'm a fan of jumping really low to train your arm to move more. Alright, the last sort of logistical topic we're going to cover, which is loadouts.
Enemy heavy.
I assume most of you have learned the common scrim loadouts by now. But in case anybody hasn't, we're just going to go over it. For VS, which you're all on, you guys should be using the Orion with most times, 95% of the time, use a laser sight. Foregrip can be used for personal preference, however, it's not really that important for the Orion because the horizontal recoil is pretty manageable and random, so it's really not controllable anyway. And laser sight is very useful. As a secondary, you should be using the Commissioner or the Underboss or the Pilot. That kind of comes down to personal preference. The Pilot comes with a couple weird use cases where there's a weird learning curve to it, but other than that,
No one else plays Light Assault here, right?
stick with the
I am.
revolvers. As far as light assault goes, VS light assault, you could be using the Horizon if you're comfortable with its usage. Other
No.
than that, use the Serpent.
Serpent.
Laser sights as well, soft point ammo. LAs may choose to take a Black Hand for long range potential. However, that is a separate playstyle. Deserves a separate explanation and individual tutoring from someone who actually knows what they're doing with them. Light assaults, your rocket rifle doesn't matter. Heavies take the Desi, depending on the rule set. Obviously a Dren Shield, Nanoweave armor, conch grenades for heavy, flashes for light assault, medkits for both classes. Knives, other than the default, are banned. And implants. Implants is actually can be a long extended discussion. Some formats ban implants and some don't, or they ban different implants. For the most part though, you should be sticking with basically 2 implant sets. You can either, or 3. If you are unconfident with your aim, you can run Assimilate Battle Hardened. Totally reasonable and a solid implant choice. If you are dealing with conchs in a close range map, powerhouses especially, Ganon, Chalk, you can then run Ocular Shield and Assimilate. If you do not like any of those options, you can also run Symbiote Assimilate using the ASC slot in your suit, which is another completely separate playstyle, which requires a little more aggression to keep Symbiote from eating you alive. TR,
And always run medkits.
always run medkits. TR primaries, MSW for heavies, Carve if you're a really weird person, but it's like 1%, Lynx or Jaguar for LAs. NC is Anchor or Gossaw for heavies. Anchor if you want to be able to hit fire at all. Gossaw if you always ADS. LAs is GD7F.
Or Bandit.
Or Bandit, right, thank you. Everything else is always the same. Bolters is separate as well, and not really worth talking about.
And we don't have any here today, so.
Alright,
Yeah, fuck them.
Fuck live.
the bolters already know what they should be doing.
Eyes
Yep.
open. Enemy heavy.
Alright,
Spotted
cool.
Enemy heavy.
a whole bunch of you have probably kind of dealt with this before, but I'm going to take a minute to talk about aim and the mentality you need to have around aim to succeed and not be a shitter.
Click heads.
So yes, obviously the goal of aiming is to click
Eyes
heads,
open.
but also you have to realize that aiming is not something that can be taught.
Stay alert.
It has to just be you grinding at it and improving. Aim is completely self-improvement. Nobody can help you aim better. It's only you. And it is a constant battle to be aiming well. So if you ever slack on your aim, then it's going to come back to bite you. And you need to be constantly putting attention and effort into improving your aim, or else it will deteriorate. It's very important to keep aim in the front of your mind. Alright, actual concepts now that most of you, again, should already know, but the new players probably won't. If you're a new player to the Scrim team, or a new player to FPS in general, please join Discord and watch my stream. It'll be very important to watch what I'm doing. Alright, so we're going to talk about crosshair
Enemy
placement.
heavy.
The default of crosshair placement is the fact that you always want to be aiming at head level, and you always want to be aiming where your enemy is most likely going to be, which means you have to move your crosshair the least possible.
Stay alert. Enemy heavy nearby.
Alright, this is all I'm going to get for the Discord stream, that's fine. With crosshair placement, one of the ways to train it is a cool game I like to call sticky corners, which basically means no matter where you're looking, you always stick your crosshair to the corner that you're pieing. You always stick your crosshair to different spots where the enemy could be, and when you're pieing corners, your crosshair is always at the corner, because that's where the enemy's going to pick you from. You shouldn't be running around with your crosshair looking all willy-nilly in the middle. Keep your crosshair at the edges and the corners, so you're always looking where the enemy may be. This also applies for commonly held angles. If someone is holding a commonly held angle, you can pre-aim the angle through walls and not have to move your crosshair more than needed. So basically, crosshair placement, always keep your crosshair at head level and make sure you're putting your crosshair in a spot that it makes sense. This is a very hard concept to get without video resources, so I encourage you to look it up. There's a whole bunch of guides on it for other games, but it's still applicable.
How far
Alright.
off the corner should I aim?
It depends on the scenario. I would most of the time keep your crosshair right on the corner. It's not really worth trying to calculate reaction time and distance from the corner, especially in a game with a high TTK, like PlanetSide. In a game like Counter-Strike or Siege, it may be worthwhile to
Hey, can we
use
stop
a
shooting shit, please?
reaction gap to hit one-taps, but in PlanetSide it's really not as important. Although if you are stationary holding a static angle, it may be worthwhile to give your crosshair a little bit of a gap to allow for your reaction time. Other than that, it's really not that important in my opinion. Alright, next up is bursting. I'm hoping most of you know how to burst properly by now. Does anybody not know how to burst properly?
Stay alert. Enemy
Alright,
heavy
perfect.
nearby.
We'll move on. Next is hipfire. People often underestimate the effectiveness of hipfire. These are the same people who often use foregrips instead of lasers. Haha, scrubs.
Yeah, it took me hours of scrimming someone 1v1 in this chevron to be converted to laser sight. Hipfire is just ridiculous.
Hipfire is very effective, even at ranges of like 10 feet, 5 meters. I would be able to still hipfire, and especially if you have a laser sight, you can still manage to hipfire for the head.
Especially on allies with that
Especially on
super
allies,
tight
yeah.
cone of fire. It fires pretty good.
It is very effective to hipfire for heads, even though you may be inclined to hipfire for the body, so you hit all your shots. Hipfiring for the head is very effective in hipfire ranges, and you can still use the same bursting technique with hipfire as you do with normal gunplay and shooting. So burst with hipfire, be very effective, headshot people from 5 meters away with hipfire to keep yourself more mobile in the fight. Next up, quick little tip about secondary usage. Secondaries are very much the hipfire kings. Their cone of fire is smaller than your primary weapon, and it is relatively small. 90% of the time you should be hipfiring with your secondary. aiming down sights for long ranges is alright, but very often you should only be using your secondary in close ranges anyway, and so most of the time you'll be hip firing. Obviously aim for the head. If you're using a revolver sidearm, make sure you're not spamming all your shots everywhere, make sure you're actually aiming properly. And remember, actually that's the next part. Next up is how to properly use quick knifing. If you're close range with someone, quick knife does half their health, or a third of their effective health if they're heavy assault. So learn how to quick knife effectively in close range. Another quick tip with the secondary, if you land one headshot and then a quick knife, people will die instantly. And so if you're in close range with a secondary in a do or die situation, that is often one of your best bets, is trying to go for a sidearm knife combo. Alright, movement now. Step by step, back to basics. Strafing.
Enemy heavy.
Remember that your strafing should be the width of the pillars in this building, width of the gray pillars. If you're strafing left and right and have aimed down sights and you're not moving your mouse at all, you should be strafing with your crosshair back and forth between the pillars. That is the proper length of strafe. Hip fire is a little bigger, more like a length of an infantry terminal if you saw them. But yeah. Do not strafe too small or else you stand still and jitter. Don't strafe too long or people will track you on your long strafes. Never hold W or S while you're strafing. It makes your strafing basically useless. And always remember to strafe perpendicular to your target. Now for crouching and proper crouching. The typical crouch we'll see is what is commonly referred to as a micro crouch, which is you simply tap your crouch button, and even if your crosshair doesn't move, your animation still goes and you'll dodge bullets because your hitbox still moves. Thus, tapping crouch is a very reasonable option in a lot of gunfights. However, against skilled players who are always aiming at your head, wow, words are hard. Against skilled players who are always aiming at your head, it is worthwhile to throw in a held full crouch once in a while. Don't do the weird thing where you spam crouch and you kind of sink down through the floor. Hold crouch all the way down and let go of crouch all the way up. That is the way to retain the most speed and not lose speed and mess up your aim too much. Use both crouches, micro crouch and full crouch at different intervals. Mix it up, confuse your opponents. I wouldn't recommend full crouching on live. It's usually not necessary, but on Jaeger it can be very effective. The other thing to do is not crouch too much. It lowers your movement speed too much and it's not worth it. Less is more, guys. Your goal is to be unpredictable, not jittery as fuck. Alright, last but not least.
You did say that micro crouch moves the hitbox, right? Just not the character. This would explain why I've tilted some people.
It moves the character as well.
It doesn't move
Well, it moves it some, but not all the way down to...
Not all the way down. Where are you? Are you practice 4? So, like, this is micro crouching. On my crosshair really isn't moving, but my character is doing a full duck animation and moving the hitbox. This would be full crouching, right? This makes you stay down longer and actually makes you go down a little lower. When you micro crouch, you're dodging 1, maybe 2 bullets. If you're really lucky, you dodge a full burst, but it doesn't happen often. You're dodging 1 or 2 bullets while keeping the most movement speed, strafe speed possible. That's all it's meant for. It's not meant to like make your opponent miss all their shots. It's just meant to, in the middle of your strafe, keep your head hitbox mobile so you can dodge a couple bullets and they don't quad ping you. A full crouch is a more of a, I guess, deceptive movement option where you crouch all the way down, and it is to try to make your opponent miss all their shots. Because if they pre-aim for your head, they're going to miss a lot of their shots and have to adjust their aim downwards. The danger, of course, of full crouching is that you're very slow down here. You might as well not be moving, and your head is very easy to shoot. So once you're down here, you're basically screwed. It's do or die time. So don't start a crouch. Don't start a fight with a full crouch, probably. But it is a fun tactic to pull out every once in a while to confuse enemies and mess with their crosshair placement. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Alright, last but not least, the UI calls it the disco step. You should be doing this for every gunfight. Using strafing and crouching together, throwing 1 crouch in the middle of your strafes back and forth using the proper width, kind of looks like a disco step because you're moving side to side and bobbing your head up and down in the middle. This is effective. You're not going to get quad dinked very easily. The key to this, however, is to keep it fluid and not go too fast and not panic. Fluidity is everything. Bursting, fluidity is key. Strafing and crouching, fluidity is key. Make your changes of direction fluid and don't stop ever during that change of direction. You'll most likely die. That's basic fundamentals. Is everybody now on the same page? Everybody
sir.
knows how to crouch. Everybody knows how to strafe. Everybody knows how to disco step. Everybody knows how to burst, hip fire, and do everything properly.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Medkit shuffling might be worth going over